January 1st, 2026. That's when over 2,000 California gas stations could shut their doors forever. Not because they can't sell gas, not because there are no customers, but because of underground storage tanks that most drivers have never even thought about. The compliance deadline is 47 days away. The penalties start at $500 per day per tank. For stations with multiple tanks, that's financial death in weeks. Small family businesses that have served their communities for decades are making an impossible choice right now. Pay hundreds of thousands for upgrades they can't afford or close permanently. This isn't a distant threat. It's happening in 47 days. And if you think gas prices are high now, wait until you see what happens when 2,000 stations disappear overnight. California's underground storage tank compliance crisis is about to trigger the largest wave of gas station closures in state history. With over 2,000 stations facing daily penalties starting January 1st that could force permanent shutdowns within weeks. Here's what's happening right now. California law requires all gas stations to replace or upgrade single-walled underground storage tanks. These are the large containers buried beneath every gas station that hold thousands of gallons of fuel. Single-walled tanks are older technology. They're more likely to leak and contaminate groundwater. The state has been phasing them out for years. The deadline for compliance is January 1st, 2026. After that date, penalties begin immediately. $500 to $5,000 per day per non-compliant tank. A typical gas station has 3 to 6 underground tanks. Do the math. A station with 4 tanks faces up to $20,000 in daily penalties if they're not compliant. According to state records, over 2,000 gas stations across California still have non-compliant tanks. These aren't just numbers on a spreadsheet. These are family businesses, rural stations, and community anchors that have operated for decades. Many are small, independent operators who simply cannot afford the upgrade costs. Replacing underground storage tanks costs between $100,000 and $400,000 per station. For a small business already operating on thin margins, this represents years of profit. Many owners have exhausted their savings, maxed out credit lines, and still can't cover the costs. The choice is brutal. Spend money they don't have, or face penalties that will bankrupt them in weeks. The state has offered some assistance programs, but the funding is limited and the application process is complex. Many small operators don't qualify or can't navigate the bureaucratic requirements. They're caught between environmental compliance and economic survival. This crisis didn't happen overnight. It's the result of several forces colliding simultaneously. First, environmental protection. Single-walled underground storage tanks pose genuine risks to groundwater contamination. When they leak, they can pollute water supplies and create environmental hazards that cost millions to clean up. The state's push for double-walled tanks, or advanced leak detection systems, is based on legitimate environmental concerns. But the implementation has been anything but smooth. Second, the compliance timeline. The original deadline was set years ago, but many station owners kept delaying the upgrades, hoping for more affordable solutions or additional funding. Some believed the deadline would be extended again. Others simply couldn't afford to act earlier. Now, with 47 days left, there's no more time for delays. Third, the cost burden falls disproportionately on small operators. Major oil companies and large chains have the capital to handle these upgrades. They've been replacing tanks systematically for years. But independent gas stations, family businesses, and rural operators don't have corporate backing. They're facing the same compliance requirements as multi-billion-dollar corporations, but without the resources to meet them. Fourth, limited contractor availability. Even stations that have the money are struggling to find contractors who can complete the work before January 1st. Tank replacement requires specialized equipment, environmental permits, and certified technicians. The demand has overwhelmed the available workforce. Some stations have been told they can't get their work done until spring 2026, months after the penalty period begins. Fifth, the permit process itself creates additional delays. Environmental permits for tank replacement can take weeks or months to approve. Local building permits add more time. Some stations have been waiting for regulatory approval longer than they expected, pushing them dangerously close to the deadline through no fault of their own. The regulatory framework treats all gas stations equally, regardless of size or financial capacity. A family-owned station in rural California faces the same requirements as a corporate-owned location in Los Angeles. The one-size-fits-all approach ignores the economic realities facing different types of operators. Banking has made the situation worse. Many small gas station owners have been unable to secure loans for compliance upgrades. Banks view gas stations as higher-risk investments due to environmental liability concerns. Even profitable stations with good credit histories struggle to get financing for tank replacement projects. 3 scenarios could unfold starting January 1st, and none of them are good for California drivers. The worst-case scenario is immediate widespread closures. Stations that can't comply and can't afford the penalties shut down permanently. Over 2,000 stations could close within the first quarter of 2026. Rural areas would be hit hardest, with some communities losing their only nearby gas station. Urban areas would see increased travel times to find fuel and longer lines at remaining stations. The sudden reduction in supply would drive prices higher almost immediately. The base case scenario involves selective enforcement and gradual closures. State regulators might focus penalties on the most egregious cases first, giving some stations additional time to comply. But even partial enforcement would force hundreds of stations to close. The financial pressure would be unsustainable for most small operators. Prices would rise more gradually, but the supply squeeze would still be significant. The best-case scenario requires immediate state intervention. Emergency funding, deadline extensions, or regulatory flexibility could prevent mass closures. But with 47 days left, there's limited time for new legislative solutions. Any intervention would need to happen quickly and at scale to make a meaningful difference. Gas prices will rise regardless of which scenario unfolds. Fewer stations mean less competition and higher prices. Rural areas will face the steepest increases, as they typically have fewer stations to begin with. Some communities could become fuel deserts, with no nearby gas stations at all. The economic ripple effects extend beyond fuel costs. Gas stations employ thousands of Californians directly. Closures mean job losses in communities that often have limited alternative employment. Many gas stations also serve as convenience stores and local gathering places. Their loss affects community fabric beyond just fuel access. Station owners face different individual decisions. Some are scrambling to complete upgrades before January 1st. Others are negotiating with buyers, hoping to sell before the deadline. Many are simply planning to close permanently rather than face ongoing penalties. The uncertainty is creating panic among operators who've invested their life savings in their businesses. Supply chain implications are serious. Fuel distribution networks are designed around current station locations. Sudden closures could create logistical challenges for fuel delivery companies. Some areas might face temporary fuel shortages if distribution systems can't adapt quickly enough to the new reality. Legal challenges are already emerging. Some station owners are threatening lawsuits over the implementation timeline and penalty structure. Industry associations are lobbying for emergency relief, but legal proceedings typically take months or years, offering little help for the immediate crisis. If you drive in California, this affects you directly. Here's what you can do to prepare for what's coming. Monitor local gas station closures in your area. Pay attention to which stations might be at risk. Smaller, independent operators are more likely to face compliance challenges. If you notice stations posting closure notices or for sale signs, that's an early warning of supply disruptions in your neighborhood. Map alternative fuel sources near your home and work. Identify multiple gas stations within reasonable driving distance. Don't rely on just one or two locations. If closures happen suddenly, you'll want backup options that don't require long detours or waiting in lines. Consider adjusting your fueling habits. Keep your tank fuller than usual during the first quarter of 2026. If supply disruptions occur, you don't want to be caught with an empty tank when stations are crowded or temporarily out of fuel. This isn't hoarding, it's prudent planning. Track gas price trends in your area. Use apps like Gas Buddy to monitor prices at different stations. As closures occur, prices will likely spike at remaining locations. Knowing which stations offer the best prices can save you significant money over time. Plan longer trips carefully. If you regularly drive through rural areas, research fuel availability along your route. Some rural communities might lose their only gas station, creating unexpected fuel gaps on longer journeys. Plan refueling stops in advance. Support local stations that are trying to comply. If you know of family-owned stations working to upgrade their tanks, consider giving them your business during this transition period. Small operators need steady revenue to help fund compliance efforts. Contact your representatives about this issue. State legislators might not fully understand how the deadline will affect local communities. Let them know how station closures could impact your daily life and local economy. Grassroots pressure could influence potential emergency measures. Stay informed about state regulatory actions. California officials might announce last-minute changes to enforcement or compliance requirements. Follow local news and state agency announcements for updates that could affect the situation. Consider alternative transportation options. If gas becomes significantly more expensive or harder to find, evaluate other ways to meet your transportation needs. This might include ride-sharing, public transit, or carpooling arrangements, especially for non-essential trips. Don't panic buy fuel when the crisis hits. Panic buying creates artificial shortages and drives prices higher. Buy fuel normally, but stay aware of the situation and plan accordingly. Here's what we know. Over 2,000 California gas stations face daily penalties starting January 1st, 2026. Underground storage tank compliance requirements are forcing impossible financial choices for small operators. Penalties of $500 to $5,000 per day per tank will bankrupt most non-compliant stations within weeks. Rural communities and independent operators face the highest risk. The state environmental goals are legitimate, but the implementation is creating economic chaos. Small businesses that have served their communities for decades are being forced to choose between spending money they don't have or closing permanently. Major chains and corporate operators will survive. Family businesses and rural stations will not. Californians should prepare for higher gas prices and reduced fuel access starting in January. This isn't fear-mongering, it's mathematical reality. When supply drops and demand stays the same, prices rise. When 2,000 gas stations potentially disappear, the effects will be immediate and long-lasting. The question isn't whether this crisis will affect you. The question is how severe the impact will be in your specific area. Rural Californians will face the biggest challenges, but no one will be completely unaffected. What do you think happens when these penalties start? Will the state intervene with emergency measures, or will California really lose 2,000 gas stations? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and make sure to subscribe for updates as this story develops. The clock is ticking, and in 47 days, we'll find out just how serious this crisis really is.